Welcome to Vision Plus and welcome to this senior for mathematics on complex numbers. We are now in example 4 and we are doing division of complex numbers. So example 4 says that we are given Z1, Z2 and Z3 and we need to find 1 over Z1. Please note that complex numbers can be as many as possible. We can say Z1 up to Z5. Please always adhere to the question and pick the ones that the question requires. In this case, part A says that we need to find 1 out of Z, 1 out of Z1. And this is not usual from what we have been doing, the numbers that we have been addressing. So how do we tackle this? Let's substitute for Z1. So we shall just say 1 out of Z1 equals to 1 out of, what is Z1? Z1 is negative 3i plus 3. This means that we are trying to divide 1 by Z1. In other words, we are trying to divide 1 by negative 3 plus 3. Remember, when we are dividing any numbers, we don't need to have I on the denominator. It doesn't matter what is on the numerator. It doesn't matter. Complex number, whatever it doesn't matter. What matters is we need to get rid of I on the denominator. And we do that simply by getting the conjugate of the denominator. I'm just writing conjugate, but you must keep in mind that this is the conjugate of the denominator. Remember, when we're getting the conjugate, you only change the sign of the imaginary part, the part containing I. It is negative here, so it will be positive. 3i plus 3. After getting the conjugate, then we simply multiply both the numerator and the denominator by that conjugate of the denominator. In this case, we shall now have 1 out of Z1 being equal to 1, that is the numerator. Multiply it by the conjugate of the denominator, which is 3i plus 3. And then we divide by denominator times its conjugate. So here we shall have negative 3i plus 3, that is the denominator. But we are multiplying it by its conjugate, which is 3i plus 3. This way, you can be in position to proceed with our normal procedure of multiplication and simplification. So, what is 1 times 3i? It is simply 3i. What is 1 times 3? It is simply plus 3. Then we are dividing it by negative 3i times 3i gives us negative 9i squared. Negative 3i times 3 gives us negative 9i only. 3 times 3 gives us positive 9i. 3 times 3i gives us positive 9i. Then 3 times 3 gives us 9. Now from there we go on to further simplify. This means 1 out of Z1 equals to 3i plus 3. They are not compatible and there are no like terms and there are no like terms. So there's no way we simplify them. So we keep them the way they are. 3i plus 3 over, what is negative 9i plus i? They cancel out. One is negative and the other is positive, and they are of the same signs. They cancel out. So I will have here negative 9i squared. But what is I squared? I squared is negative 1. This and this have cancelled, plus 9. Here plus 9. Here we will apply that I squared equals to negative 1. So we continue here to have 3i plus 3 out of negative 9 times negative 1 is 9 plus 9. This gives us 3i plus 3 out of 18. If you add, then we separate. This gives us a 3i out of 18 plus 3 out of 18. Then we simplify. By 3, we shall have I. By 3, we shall have 6 plus 1 out of 6. That is the answer for part A. And going to part B says that we need to find Z2 inverse or Z2 power negative 1. This is the inverse of Z2. Part B, it might look scary. That is Z2 power negative 1. That is just like inverse of Z2. And from your indices, you know that if a number or an expression is moved from the numerator to the denominator, its power changes. I mean the sign of its power changes from the changes between positive and negative. Even when you are carrying it from the denominator to the numerator, its sign also changes. So, and from your indices, you had something like this, that a power n is the same as 1 out of a power negative n. And it's also the same if you have a power negative n, this is the same as 1 out of a power n. From here it changed from positive to negative. From here it was negative, it has changed to positive. So assuming n is 1, if n is 1, that means for the first case here, if n is 1, that means case 1 becomes that a power 1 is the same as 1 out of a power negative 1. And then for part 2, the love a power negative 1 becomes 1 out of a power 1. And this is the same knowledge that we shall apply here. This implies that Z2 power negative 1 is the same as 1 out of Z2 power positive 1. And in other words, we normally ignore 1. So here we could just say it is 1 out of A. So here the same as is 1 out of Z2. And simply from here, you can use the knowledge of the solution to part A so that you can address part B. Continuing with it, we shall now say that Z2 power negative 1 is the same as 1 out of Z2. And this implies that we shall have 1 out of, what is Z2? 1 out of Z2. Z2 is 7 plus 10i. Is 7 plus 10 plus 10i. If you look at the numerator, it is 1. And the denominator has two terms. It has both the real and the imaginary part. So we need to get the conjugate. So getting the conjugate here, let me just get the conjugate here to save our space. Conjugate. It becomes 7 minus 10i. We simply change the sign of the imaginary part. After this, then we multiply. So now here we can just say Z2 or negative 1 is the same as 1 out of 7 plus 10i. But we are going to multiply the numerator by the conjugate, which is 7 minus 10i. Also the denominator, since there are two terms, we put them in the bracket. Also the denominator by the conjugate of the denominator, which is its conjugate, in that form. Then from here, multiplication laws apply. So here we shall now have 1 times 7 is 7, 1 times negative 10i is negative 10i, over 7 times 7 is like 49. 7 times 7 is 49. 7 times negative 10i is negative 70i. 10i times 7 is 70i. 10i times negative 10i is negative 100i squared. Is negative 100i squared. Because 10 times negative 10 is negative 100. I times I is I squared. So from here we proceed. There's no way we can further simplify the numerator. So we maintain it over. This and this will always cancel. What is negative 70 plus 70? Negative 70 plus 70 is 0. So this can cancel out. So we are left with 49 minus 100 I squared, which is negative 1. I squared is negative 1. So we continue here. So we'll have 7 minus 10i over 49 49. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 100. So this gives us here 7 minus 10i out of 149. And then you decide to distribute the denominator. This is correct, but distributing the denominator makes it easier for you to simplify without errors. So here we shall have 7 out of 149 minus 10i out of 149. Looking at this, I don't know if it is possible to divide 149 by 7. It is not possible. So this is the answer. This is the, and then going to part C. Part C is not different from part A. Just that the difference is the numerator, which is for part A is 1 and for part C is 3. So we need to just follow the same procedure. That is 3 out of Z3 equals to 3 out of, what is Z3? Z3 is negative 1 minus I. I said it doesn't matter what is on the numerator. Your focus is the denominator. Since there is I and there is a real part as well, we need to get the conjugate of the denominator. Conjugate of the denominator. What you do by changing the sign of the imaginary part. So here we have negative 1. We change the sign from negative to positive I. And then we multiply. So 3 out of Z3 now becomes 3 out of Z3 is negative 1 minus I. But now we need to apply the conjugate. So multiply the numerator by the conjugate, which is negative 1 plus I. Also multiply the denominator by its conjugate, which is negative 1 plus I. And then we simply multiply. 3 times negative 1 is negative 3. 3 times I is 3I, positive 3I, over negative 1 times negative 1, positive 1. Negative 1 times negative I, negative I. Negative I times negative 1, positive I. Negative I times positive I is negative I squared. Then we go on to simplify. This gives us here 3 out of Z3 equals to, the numerator can no longer be simplified. So it remains as negative 3 plus 3i, but we are dividing it by negative I and positive I are going to cancel. So here we shall have 1. So here we shall have 1 minus, here we shall have 1 minus I squared. Minus I squared. But what is I squared? I squared is negative 1. I squared is negative 1. So what do we do here? We shall have negative 3 plus 3i out of 1. Negative minus negative 1. 1 minus negative 1 is 1 plus 1. Negative. There is imaginary 1 here. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. This gives us here negative 3 plus 3i out of 2. Then we distribute the denominator. Gives us here negative 3 out of 2 plus 3i out of 2. And this is the answer. This is the real part and that is the imaginary part. So this is the overall solution to example 4. If you have questions, please send them and our team shall be in position to address them. Thank you.